I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. Although I am no longer on the hospice program, their chaplain still drops by every month to see me. Monday of this week, he came by, and I had the opportunity to show him the current edition of Love is a Liberator, showing him the testimony of my healing. I gave him my second copy, and he took it with him. He already has a copy that I've given of the Science and Health that I've given him. Yesterday, the hospice caseworker stopped by. She was quizzing me on how I felt, and I suggested that she too read a testimony. During the reading, she exclaimed, "Oh, my mother is a Christian Scientist. I would like to have a copy of the testimony to read to her." Although this was my only copy of Love is a Liberator, I gave it to her. Then I asked her if she would like to have a copy of Science and Health. She said she would be most willing to have one, and so I gave her one. I suggested that she start reading the chapter on fruitage. She wanted to know about a local church, and I told her the closest church we have here in Arizona is Lake Havasu City, but that I attended church service by way of telephone. I then presented a brief message of our church. I am most grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna from Oregon, go ahead.
A while back, I fell and broke my arm in 3 places. I immediately called my practitioner for help. A short time later, I had my daughter drive me to the hospital emergency room. I was amazed at how little pain there was, so I knew the practitioner was at work. After being x-rayed, I was told I would need surgery. Since the only doctor in town who does that was on vacation, I would have to go over to Idaho to be treated. Since I hadn't been to a doctor in about 35 years, I was very apprehensive about the whole thing. On the morning of each day that I had an appointment, I would call my practitioner and ask her to pray for us to have a safe trip. With each trip, I could feel her working for me. She also said she would pray for me to be calm and to know that everyone on the medical staff that I came in contact with would unerringly and rightly only do good. While waiting to see the doctor, I noticed how unusually calm I was, which carried through for the entire appointment. The doctor said I wouldn't need surgery after all, and I know it was because of the practitioner's help. All the following appointments went just as well. Even though they sent me home with pain pills from the emergency room the day I fell, I never needed to take them. I'd like to quote something from Herbert Eustace's book, Christian Science, Its Clear, Correct Teaching, on page 706. Quote, "The mind that believes there is something to be healed is the same mind that holds within itself all that constitutes the disease, and therefore is not the mind to correct it." Unquote. This helps explain why the practitioners are so important. We've been so mesmerized to think that injuries or error are real, it's sometimes hard for us to wake up from the nightmare, so we need their help. My practitioner is truly a gift from God, and I am so grateful for her. I'm also grateful to God for guiding me to Christian Science and giving me a chance to understand the truth about our being.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Tonight, I am so grateful for all this church is teaching me about watching. There always seemed to be much in the world that was frightening, and all my life before coming to Plainfield, I was gripped by fear. I never wanted to watch the news or learn about world events because it just felt like everything was unraveling, and I could do nothing about it. Of course, during that time, I was living a pretty godless life, and that only made it all the worse. Now that I have been learning about Christian Science at this church and how to do watches, I'm not frightened by these events. I see it as an opportunity to put truth and love into operation in my own life. I no longer feel crushed by the negativity of the world because I know this message that is trying to convince me of all that garbage is a lie. Some might say right now that these events aren't a lie, that they are real and scary. But as I go out into the world each day, I see happy people doing good and showing kindness and compassion. It is easy now for me to see that God is active constantly everywhere. I see that goodness is the normal state of the world, and no amount of doomsaying can make truth not true or love not love. It is amazing to feel this freedom from fear that Christian Science has brought me, and to know my prayers are actually serving to help the world through the individual and the unity watches here at the church. Quite a different life than I lived years ago, and I owe it all to God bringing me here and to all the lessons and practitioner support I've received since then. Thank you.
Thank you. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. I am deeply grateful to God for Christian Science, Mrs. Eddy, and my practitioner, and all I've been given by this church and its members. I am grateful for His mercy and loving care that has guided me towards a better understanding of my relationship with Him, bringing stability into my experience where there was none before, and a sense of peace that is built on trust where there was once a great fear of trust. Before coming here and being taught Christian Science, my life was a mess of disorderly experiences. I found I was not living at all, but very badly attempting to survive. I had no hope that life would change. My only armor was a hardened heart, full of self-will and vengeance, an armor that was very quickly crushed by perfect love. God has truly sent His angels to minister unto me and show me the way. I am grateful to my practitioner for all the healings and all the knowledge she has shared, which has raised me out of the darkness, opened my eyes, and started me on a path towards life and soul. Recently, I got together with all my brothers and sisters for a week of camping. In the past, when we got together, we would spend hours by the campfire rehashing old wounds. It would stir up my anger, though I would remain silently hurting. This time was different. I prayed and watched my thoughts as I have learned here, and saw them all as God's children. The conversation never turned to past wounds, but was changed to the sharing of gratitude for healthy meals, warm clothing, and long-suppressed joys of childhood. I saw the nature of each individual idea of God being expressed in charitableness, love, humanity, compassion, and care. There was one point when my sister asked me what I thought Mom and Dad, having passed, are doing right now. I told her they are very happily working for God. It gave me the opportunity to explain to her how I have been completely healed by the power of truth as taught in Christian Science, and how reading and understanding the Bible has enriched my life. Every one of my brothers and sisters gave each other a kiss and a hug and said, "I love you," when they left. I am so very grateful for this wonderful healing and the many blessings that will follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for those readings tonight. I am very grateful also for practitioner support here at Plainfield. Continual work with my practitioner has been reforming and blessing all areas of my life by giving me a new and clearer understanding of God and Christian Science. When I walked the other day, I was able to smell a lovely flowering bush from quite a distance. And I found that when I was walking up the hill, it was with much ease and strength in my breath, something I haven't been able to do either one for quite a time. It also occurred to me this year was the second spring since working with her that I did not experience the severe allergy symptoms that were very uncomfortable and restrictive and restricted my activities for weeks at a time, and it has been going on for years. During this period of working with a practitioner, I was also replacing reactions such as fear, irritation, and criticism with love and principle of God. This is bringing forth gratitude, calm, honesty, and courage, among other things. I'm very grateful for this science that Mary Baker Eddy sacrificed so much to give to us. And I'm grateful for Christ Jesus, our way shower, and the many individuals who dedicate their lives to spreading this word. Thank you for the service this evening.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for those magnificent readings. I would like to share my gratitude tonight for our website and for the people who make this dynamic living example of church possible. To me, the Word of God is church that will and does go out from an edifice or in other ways such as telecommunication and social media. The Plainfield Church website is a spiritual, informative, healing influence going out to all mankind. My one small example that helped me today is an audio I found on my phone read by a church member called Working in Truth from A Dominion Within, written by Reverend G.A. Gratzer. It talked about work on trusting God until you have inward peace. Thank you for everything, and thank you for this beautiful service.
Thank you. Heidi from Maryland, go ahead.
I'd like to share a healing experience that I had when I was teaching at a private Christian school. I had been there for a couple of years already, and I was well respected, and many parents requested that I be their child's teacher, and I felt blessed in many ways to be employed there. I loved it. And in the beginning of this one particular school year, it seemed like I was beginning to become very forgetful. At first, I would misplace personal items like my purse or my keys or my cell phone, and they would turn up in odd places. The school janitor, another teacher, or a parent would find them, and it began to be a little joke around the school as to what I could manage to lose the next day. As weeks went by, things got worse. Soon I was misplacing textbooks, the students' homework, and test papers. I became very nervous and distraught over the gossip, which seemed to be true. The rumors were that I was experiencing early symptoms of Alzheimer's disease or simply losing my mind. And before things got worse, I contacted a practitioner from this church. She lovingly said she would help me right away, and she talked to me about God's oneness with man. She said he was my mind and that I could in no way be separated from him or lose him no matter how hard I tried. During the next several weeks, there was additional gossip, such as the children were afraid of me, that I yelled at them, that grades had been changed on their papers and in my grade book. These were just a few of the many rumors going around. I lost sleep, I shed many tears, and I was very fearful. In spite of taking every human step that I could think of, like writing things down, making notes, as to where I put things, the situation persisted. Then a parent submitted an unkind letter, along with 100 names on a petition requesting my dismissal. The principal said she had no other recourse but to place me on a 60-day probation or request my immediate resignation. That meant that, among other things, I was to be observed in my classroom unannounced at any time. I told the principal I would accept the probation because I loved my job, I was trusting God, and wasn't about to quit. After that meeting, I called the practitioner, and she was delighted at the news. That was a reaction I didn't expect. She said she was confident that the truth would now be revealed. She told me that this was an attack on my Christ, and she also said she felt strongly I needed to protect myself against the malicious animal magnetism. A few weeks later, I was in chapel participating in our regular Monday morning service, and then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my boss telling me to lock up my classroom and then to meet her in her office. Before going, I prayed, knowing that when 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, there is love. And when I stepped inside her office, the vice principal, the school nurse were also there, and they were smiling at me. The school nurse, whose 2 children I had taught in the past, was a strong advocate during this time. and she told me that she caught another teacher in my room looking through my papers on my desk. Eventually it came out that there seemed to be some resentment towards me because the administration gave me a particular class and subject to teach. This other teacher had been expressing interest in teaching it for years, and she was told she would get a chance to do it that year. When the assignment was again given to me, she wanted to prove I was incompetent. A few days later, a letter went out to all the parents saying that the probation period was over, all claims were unfounded, and my contract had been renewed. When I told the practitioner the wonderful news, I still had some reservations about having to work with this other person. The practitioner quieted my fears, and she assured me that God would heal it or remove it. 2 days later, the other teacher announced her resignation. She was moving out of state to pursue other interests. I remain so grateful for God's love and care and all I learned during this difficult time in my life. I'm grateful for this practitioner who never failed to turn me to God and would always take my calls, sometimes more than once a day. She was always encouraging and made me persist. It's really wonderful to know that no matter what the picture is, there is a solution, and that God resolves it, not just part way, but all the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
On Monday of this week, I was walking down the stairs to our basement, and when I got to the bottom, our dog came flying down behind me, and her whole body collided with the ankle bone in my right foot. I fell down and screamed, ouch, but then I immediately began to declare that I was not hurt. My prayers included these thoughts: that accidents are unknown to God, and one idea of God cannot collide with another idea, because our true identity is spiritual. That each individual expression is safe in His care and cannot fall out of His care. I knew she hadn't meant to harm me. I didn't look at my ankle, but I got up and went about my day. There were a few times when it felt tender while walking and I had to limp a little bit. But every time I mentally declared that I could not be mesmerized to believe that an accident happened, and that error could trip up my day, which belonged to God. In the round table last Sunday, it was pointed out that we have a responsibility to not be hypnotized or mesmerized. And I had started the day by working for God and spending time with Him and identifying myself correctly, and nothing could interfere with that or make it null or void. At some point in the afternoon, I noticed that I didn't feel any tenderness or pain. In fact, everything felt completely normal. And that night, when I went to bed, there was no mark and no swelling. And in the past, I have bruised very easily from smaller bumps, but there was nothing. I'm just very grateful for this small demonstration that proves that God is ever present and that we can turn to Him for every problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. A previous testifier gave gratitude for learning to watch in this church, and this is something that I'm also most grateful for. Last week I testified about a baby boy that was taken away in a stolen car and later returned to his family with no harm. I only realized after last Wednesday night's meeting that the alert of the abduction was broadcast late on our Tuesday watch night. The Unity Watch had prepared my thought to do the work necessary, the prayerful work necessary for support of the case. My initial participation in this church was through joining a watch a little over 3 years ago, and I'm so grateful for the strength, confidence, and understanding that I'm gaining through my continued participation in these watches. I'm forever grateful for this and for all that I'm learning here. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon.
Last year, my ankles began swelling up, and it was quite frightening. So I called a practitioner in this church and asked for prayerful help. And I was given this statement: have no fear, that matter can ache, swell, and become inflamed as the result of a law of any kind, when it is self-evident that matter can have no pain or inflammation. From Signs and Health by Ms. Mary Baker Eddy. Well, immediately my fear was calmed. It did not stop immediately. It was when it was very humid, they would swell up even more, and sometimes I even had a problem putting my shoes on. Well, I realized this summer that I've had a healing. I'm not sure when it was, but at the beginning of the summer, I noticed my ankles weren't swelling, and with this humid weather, they're normal all the time. I am so grateful for this healing because I was quite fearful, and the practitioner healed the fear immediately and gave me the truth. I am so grateful for Christian Science, for Mrs. Eddy, and for all the practitioner help. And thank you for those wonderful readings.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you for those wonderful readings. I've never heard such inspired words from Moses, and it was very moving. His great love for God. I want to give gratitude also for our lesson. I find it just so much instructions coming from it. This week from the Bible, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Well, I have a son, and sometimes he's 15, and I want to communicate lessons that I've learned to him and help him to learn his own. Well, one issue is, but I don't want to be like Azar, or I want him to learn it happily. And he was having trouble getting up in the mornings. And this morning he was having trouble. He's been fighting some claim. And I looked at him, my wife looked at him and tried to urge him to, let's get up and start the day. But nothing was really happening. And I prayed. I prayed and went back to him, and it just came to me, what gets me up in the morning? I said, every morning I ask God to give me the strength to get up. There are many mornings that I just don't know where it's coming from until I ask. And it just came so naturally that it seemed like it would just be a natural thing for him also to do. Just ask God for the strength to get up. And he did, and a couple of moments later he was up and joining us for breakfast. Before I joined his church, I never realized I needed God all the time. And often I went out without it, without even checking with him. But ever since, it seems I realize in everything, like it says in the lesson, we need him. And the more that we realize that, the more good and more we're prepared to do. I thank God very much for helping me in our wonderful lessons in Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you. This is Bruce. You know something, Craig? I'm very grateful for our lessons too. Yes. In fact, I also wanted to start out by saying thanks for those magnificent readings that were given tonight. Strong, powerful statements of truth. Something really to take to heart. I was reading the lesson, and I was just reading the part from Job where it says, "He that is perfect in knowledge..." Well, there's only one that's perfect in knowledge, and that's our Almighty Father, Mother God. And it continues to say, "is with thee." It brought to mind a healing that I had that really illustrated a vital point. And this was years ago when I was in school. I was taking this class, and I was really studying hard, putting everything I had into it. Then came the time to go in and take the test for what I had just been studying. And I had the test handed to me, and I opened it up, and I started reading question after question, and I just drew a blank. I could not find one response to any of those questions. So I took that test, I folded it upside down, put it on the table, and says, "Dear Father, what do I need to know here? I thought I was prepared." And then came to me a quote from Science and Health that I'd remember reading, where it says, "It is unnecessary to resort to aught but mind." And it was like God was telling me, yeah, you think you did all this preparatory work, but where am I in your life? And when it comes time to take a test, if you don't have me by your side, how much can you really do? That taught me a lesson. Every day has its tests. But if I don't have God firmly established in my life, where am I? I'm floating with the breeze. And there are many winds of influence in this world that would like to drift you off in one direction or another, unless you are grounded in God. I thank God immensely right then for that passage from Science and Health I remembered. And then when I turned the test over again, the answers started coming. It just goes to show that the human smarts don't amount to a thing. But with God, man is intelligence itself reflected. But without God, he's nothing. And I had a chance to read an article that's on our website on human intellect by Gilbert Carpenter. Wonderful article, and it talked about Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy, who said, "Not my will, but thy will be done." And when they were in that mode, they knew everything they needed to know. So, going forward from here, dear Father, let me be part of that too. Not my will, but your will be done. And then things will be done just fine, I'm sure. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for those beautiful readings tonight. I'm grateful for understanding that God governs every area of our lives, including even the smallest details, if we do bring all under His government. Under this government, though, I cannot agree with the errors that come and then plead for Him to make me better or to make things better. I have to be faithful to this government, and I must challenge every error that comes, back it up to see where it originates from, to see that it couldn't possibly come from God, the source of all love. Science and Health tells us that Jesus' prayers were deep and conscientious protests of truth, of man's likeness to God, and of man's unity with truth and love. This Christ example and many others of so many Bible figures who stood bravely in times of trouble, real deep trouble, but they protested the errors that were showing and stood with the truth. This has to be our example. I'm grateful to have learned this. It's been my example so that I can really, whenever anything comes up, not to give in. It took a long time to come to this, but I'm grateful that through the teachings from this church, error often comes up and is seen immediately as a lie. I must continue to remain under this government, to trust it, to bring every detail to God's direction, and know that the answers are always there. He is a loving God. Thank you for the service. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Mary.
I'll read from our church website bulletin board, the first two from Pennsylvania. Although it has done before, I too would like to express my thanks for the beautiful reading by Joseph of The Greatest Thing in the World by Henry Drummond. Start with love, practice love, and all else will fall into place. And then I would like to thank everyone who has been reading for the new audio editions for our website and phones. These are a blessing, not only for members, but for all the world. When you listen, you feel the spiritual power behind the words. In Maryland, I would like to thank Carol for the scriptural selection she gave on Sunday, August 14th. I found it very uplifting. Each line told of God's power and what he can do. The last line was, "Yea, I will help thee." What more can we ask for them, that promise such as this? I was much encouraged and comforted. Thank you again. And then a couple from Costa Rica. This church is doing great things to share God's wonderful truth to the nations. The reading with the text of Mrs. Eddy's article, Body, by Gary, is a wonderful tool to bring truth into the supposed world of chaos and deception. Thank you. And then last night's Wednesday readings by Florence were superb. I plan to listen again. Thank you. So we appreciate all of you who write on the bulletin board to send your little messages of gratitude. It's greatly appreciated, and it's encouraging to hear. Then this is a letter from Virginia. Dear fellow members, my heart is increasingly filled with joy as I continue to learn in this church how to be closer to God and to listen for his direction for my life. I am very grateful for each dear and dedicated worker and for each one who shares their struggles and their triumphs, as it is a benefit to the whole world. With love. And this is someone new from India. Dear Church, I wish to thank you for the lovely website which I came across online and the readings and the roundtable discussions. I am very grateful for this past Sunday's roundtable. I feel like I really understood the concept of soul for the first time, and every word spoken just touched me in a much deeper way. Thank you all, and lots of love. I also am very grateful tonight for those readings on true government, something that we all need to understand and pray about, because the political arena certainly is never an answer for our government. The government is in God and obeying his laws and his precepts. Recently, our friend Bob, sometimes known as Parthens in Colorado, sent us a movie which some of us watched this past weekend. The name of it is Woodlawn. It's a Christian movie. It came out last year. I had never heard of it, but it was very inspiring, and it was about the very troubled times in Alabama during the 70s, the racial conflict that was going on then. And it was about a football team in one of the towns, and the football team was very troubled. It was this forced integration, and there was a lot of hatred and prejudice and fear and anger going on. And one day, someone came into the school, and he spoke to the football team about Christ Jesus. And he got everyone's attention. And he spoke to them about the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes and forgiveness and as loving your neighbor as yourself. And his words reached their hearts, and they all began to change. They began to work together. They began to love each other. And tremendous things began to happen with that football team. The coach was totally amazed. He didn't really understand what happened, but it was seeing was believing, and he too became a follower, a disciple of Christ, and seeing this healing take place right in front of him. And one of the points that they continually made, they would raise their index finger and say, "One way." And that one way was Christ's way. all these team players realized that nothing could heal these problems but Christ's way, and that in the sight of God we are all equal, and there is no reason for all of this hatred and other things going on. It continued, but it was a very, very inspiring movie, and it certainly is what is true about our country and about all nations everywhere. And as Jeremy said, you walk around and you see people loving each other and getting along. This is a false projected concept that we can't get along or that we have fear and hate toward each other. God never said it, and it's not the truth. And as we send out our love and live this truth day by day in our own hearts and faithfully doing our watches and working with the prayers, this mesmerism will be broken, because God never said it. It's not the truth about His creation. I'm so very grateful to be here tonight, to hear all the beautiful testimonies, the beautiful meetings, and to have this meeting for God's glory. Thank you all.